Hi everyone, I'm Jonathan Davidson, and over the next year or so, I'm going to write a full-length novel and share every step of the process here on YouTube, starting with how to find a good story idea and turn it into a strong and commercially appealing premise, and ending with a revised manuscript and query materials that can be sent out to literary agents. You'll get to see every step of the process along the way, including access to each page I write, from the first draft to its final revision. And in each episode, I'll be sharing the storytelling theory that I've learned from years of writing fiction, taking screenwriting classes, reading way too many craft books, and from earning an MFA in writing popular fiction at Seton Hill University, which is an incredible program that I can't recommend highly enough. My hope is that you will write a novel alongside me, and that the series will give you the theory and practical tools you need to take the ideas in your mind and turn them into gripping novels. Today, we'll talk about the kinds of ideas that can turn into novels. We'll also look at some things you can do to identify and generate story ideas. And finally, I'll share the story idea that I will be expanding into a novel during this series. If you have a story idea already, feel free to skip ahead to episode 2, where I'll show you how to turn that idea into a premise. But you might learn something if you end up sticking around. Where do you get your story ideas? People like to ask writers that question. And it's a hard question to answer sometimes because coming up with a novel idea feels kind of mysterious and random. But if you're serious about writing novels, ideas are your raw material, and you'll need a lot of them. Thankfully, there are some things we can do to better notice and capture spontaneous story ideas, and there are also ways to generate quality story ideas on command. A simple way to get more story ideas is to lower your expectations of what a story idea looks like. It's easy to think that coming up with a brilliant and original idea is critical for writing a novel. I've had people tell me that they would love to write, but that they don't have any good ideas. They wait for a dose of inspiration that feels big enough and brilliant enough before they actually begin. And you've probably heard stories of novelists who get a big explosion of inspiration and they spend 2 weeks slamming espresso shots and typing furiously until they reach the end. That sounds like fun, but the reality is that most novels have very humble beginnings. They start out as a single mental image, a solitary sentence, a snippet of dialogue overheard between strangers on the street, or some modified version of a real-life event that happened to the author. A writer who is skilled in storytelling craft can take those tiny, simple ideas and build them into captivating stories. Think about the origin of some of the most successful novels. J.K. Rowling was sitting on a delayed train when she got the idea of a wizard boy who went to a wizard school. She kept thinking about that idea and started writing notes. Then she spent 5 years turning that idea into a manuscript. But it started out with just one small idea, a wizard boy going to school. In 1930, a Cuban fishing guide told Hemingway about an old man who caught a giant marlin. 16 years later, Hemingway started writing that idea. The Old Man and the Sea went on to win the Pulitzer and helped him win a Nobel Prize. Suzanne Collins was exhausted, and she was laying on the couch channel surfing, flipping between reality TV and coverage of the Iraq War. And in her tired mind, those ideas conflated into the idea of a deadly reality TV show. Then she started thinking about the Greek myth of Theseus and the Minotaur, and all those ideas kind of merged together to become the Hunger Games. Michael Crichton had the idea of a graduate student using DNA to recreate a dinosaur. He wrote a screenplay based on this idea. Then he wrote a novel about it from the point of view of a child. He got feedback saying it would be better if it were told from an adult perspective. So he rewrote the entire book and it became Jurassic Park. If you think about those origin stories, you'll see that even the most brilliant ideas started off small and rather mundane. None of those ideas were completely original, and stated in their most basic form, at least I don't even think they were very exciting. The value of those ideas came from how they were executed, and that's what we're going to talk about in this series. I believe those stories were successful because they followed a lot of well-understood storytelling craft that is learnable and repeatable. Each does a masterful job of creating and sustaining suspense by raising questions in the minds of readers and then delaying answers to those questions. They contain most of the steps in the hero's journey, which is an elegant and flexible story structure that is followed by most popular novels and films in the Western world. You've heard that conflict is king, but each of these stories contains something far more important that's often overlooked: authentic, deep, and self-sacrificing connection between characters. Well, maybe not Jurassic Park, but there's always an exception. In this series, we will cover all of those craft topics and many others. But for now, let's be grateful that we don't need a flash of brilliance or anything like that to get started. We just need a very simple idea, and we'll work on infusing it with power along the way. I believe that everyone stumbles across ideas that could be nurtured into wonderful novels just by experiencing everyday life. Stories are happening all around us every day. The difference between writers and everyone else is that writers take those tiny, seemingly insignificant seeds of ideas, writes them down, and starts building them into larger stories. Sometimes those ideas will jump out at us and say, "Hey, I'm a good story idea." But oftentimes they slip by because we aren't paying attention. We can help this process by consciously deciding to open our eyes and look at the world around us through a narrative lens. This can be as simple as saying to yourself every morning, "I'm going to notice story ideas today." And throughout the day, ask yourself, what stories are happening around me? This sounds very simplistic and ridiculous, but even this ritual of telling yourself to notice story ideas will make a huge difference. If you look for stories, you will find them. Notice the small things that stand out to you. A long-held desire left unanswered. The woman who gets a tattoo of her baby's ear right where he used to sleep when he slept in her arms. A fleeting thought about how you would rob a bank if you got desperate enough. I'm reviewing a book right now for the big thrill, and the author's kids came up with the idea for the story while on a family road trip. You just never know where good ideas will come from. After deciding to notice story ideas, the next step is to ask yourself, how can I remix the stories happening around me to make them more interesting? Why did that mother get a tattoo of her baby's ear? She probably got it because it's adorable and she loves her kid, but let's try to remix that idea and make it more dramatic. What if a doctor gave the baby too much oxygen, causing permanent hearing damage? Maybe the mom is a single parent who has struggled for years to put herself through law school so she can help other parents who are affected by medical malpractice. She's now an attorney and she's working on her first big case. Each time she needs a little courage, she looks at her tattoo and remembers why she's going on this difficult journey. That's literally the first idea that came to me when I tried to remix this small idea. So start noticing ideas and remixing them. Write those ideas down as soon as they occur to you. By planting those seeds as potential stories, your mind will start to work on them and attach other ideas until it'll eventually create a critical mass. In the next lesson, we will talk about how to take those tiny fragments of stories and turn them into a premise, which is a 1 to 3 sentence summary of a story idea that usually involves the main character, a sense of the major conflict of the story, and an ironic reversal or other hook that will elevate your story from a simple idea into a narrative spark that will become the foundation of your story. In the meantime, start capturing those spontaneous or noticed story ideas, however you would like. I like to email them to myself, which probably isn't the best way to save them, but it's what I do. I just checked my ideas folder in my inbox and I have 112 emails saved inside. Some of the ideas are downright ridiculous. Others are decent, and I would say a handful of them are good. Some of them are a single sentence, a short paragraph, others several pages of random notes. One is just a photo of a man riding a reindeer through a northern town besieged by snow. I keep all of these ideas because each one spoke to me in some way. They may grow into a story someday, or perhaps they'll merge to form hybrids. If you haven't made a practice of writing such ideas down, then today's a great day to start. What if you haven't had any spontaneous story ideas? Or what if you want more ideas to choose from before writing your novel? Sometimes it's impractical to hope that ideas will just occur to us. This is especially true later in the writing process. If we wait for inspiration for each sentence and chapter, we might never finish a book. Dan Pointner has a great quote about this. He said, "If you wait for inspiration to write, you're not a writer, you're a waiter." So how can we speed up the process of inspiration? Ancient Greek storytellers tried to personify the mysterious forces of creativity with Muses, the 9 daughters of Zeus, who were the source of inspiration. Ancient artists worked hard to please those muses, hoping to gain their favor. As a grounded, logical person, I don't think that muses whisper in my ears. But what I do believe is that the idea of muses and pleasing them is actually very useful when trying to harness creative energy. Think of your muse like a romantic partner, and her love languages are consistency and quality time. She doesn't want to go on dates with you if all you're going to do is stare at your phone, watch TV, or think about some other things. The muse might as well go help some other artist who is willing to show up every day and give her undivided attention. So create space in your life for uninterrupted dates with your muse. Many who work in the creative space do this and talk about this. Peter DeVry said, "I write when I'm inspired, and I see to it that I'm inspired at 9 o'clock every morning." Picasso once said, "Inspiration exists, but it must find you working." Coming up with story ideas is like any other skill. If you give it consistent time and focus, you'll get better at it. If you sit down for 10 minutes every day for the next 2 weeks and dedicate that time to thinking up story ideas, you will have spent more time on this task than almost every other human being on Earth. Your muse will notice, and she might just reward your dedication. If you've never tried to come up with story ideas before, it may feel awkward for the first couple of days and things just might not feel like it's working. But if you stick with it and persist, the ideas will come. Think about the stories occurring all around you. A family member who's in prison. A coworker brave enough to quit the job she hates to pursue her dreams. Think back to the formative experiences that shaped your life and in the lives of the people you know. Think about where you live, the old legends surrounding your town or your city. Think about things you're drawn to and find compelling. There are already worlds of stories within you and the people you know. I recommend using a pen and actual paper to capture those ideas. Don't look at your phone or any other screen where it's easy to get distracted. Just sit there, think about the stories around you, and ask yourself this question: what if? And then allow your imagination to just run wild. As I was scripting this episode, I did this exercise for 10 minutes while sitting in my local coffee shop. This is what I came up with. What if my boss moonlights as a private investigator on the weekends, and when he gets in trouble, he threatens to fire me if I don't help him with the investigation? What if aliens come peacefully to Earth and helped us become better people, only to betray us decades later after fully integrating with our society? What if the man who invented the process for making float glass fell in love with the daughter of his biggest competitor? What if the local donut shop, that never seems to have any customers, is actually a front for smuggling money into the United States? What if everyone for multiple generations was born with autism, and then people started to be born without autism? What if a science experiment creates a race of super intelligent but scarily violent ducks that terrorize a quaint town on Prince Edward Island? Those are the ideas that came to me. The critic in me thinks they're all stupid and cliche, but a good writer could take any of those ideas and turn them into excellent novels. I also know that I can always modify or remix those ideas later. Secure in that knowledge, I accept these story ideas from my rather eccentric muse and do my job, which is to write them down. Don't worry about the quality of your ideas. Nothing will offend your muse more than saying that one of her ideas is dumb. Let yourself be silly. Come up with ridiculous ideas, one so ridiculous or mundane that you'd be embarrassed to share them with anyone. In fact, you should expect dumb and silly ideas. I'd say I have 20, 40 ridiculous ideas for every decent one. Just focus on spending time with your muse and writing down whatever she utters. Eventually, some of those ideas will start to stand out and, appear more significant than the others. Those ideas that keep coming back into your mind and keep connecting with other ideas and building themselves into something more. Those are the ideas that have some natural spark that appeals to you. And that'll make them much easier to work on in the long run. This process helped me recognize and write down the idea that I'm going to turn into a novel for this YouTube series. This idea came to me on January 23, 2021. I emailed it to myself, and this is what the email said. Create a story around the title, When There Was Light. Perhaps aliens want to destroy life on Earth, so they place a shield between us and the sun, blocking its rays. That's how the idea started. Just 2 sentences. I didn't think much of the idea at the time, and even now, in its original form, it's nothing special. In fact, it's not even a story. It's just a title and perhaps one event. But my muse sent me that idea, so I wrote it down, and it stayed in the back of my mind ever since. A couple of years ago, I was reading about the James Webb Telescope, and I came across the idea of spinning polymers in space to create massive liquid lenses that could be frozen with UV light. Later, I saw a photo that featured the Svalbard Global Seed Vault in Norway. At that moment, the seed vault idea snapped together with my idea of a sun shield blocking the Earth. And in April of 2023, I emailed myself again with more details. Go ahead and pause the video if you'd like to read the idea. This second iteration of the idea is much more complete, but it still needs work before it becomes a functional premise on which we can write a compelling novel. We'll do that work in the next episode. In the meantime, work on noticing or generating some story ideas of your own so you can follow along and build one or more of your ideas into a premise. If you found this video helpful, please like it, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, all those things that YouTubers always ask you. This will convince the algorithm overlords to show this content to more aspiring writers, and then you'll get notified when future episodes drop. Until next time, keep writing.